That becomes part of what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, what risks I'm willing to take, what opportunities I'll say yes to, what opportunities I'll say no to. It might not seem like our self-talk is that important, but when you play it out and you dig layer after layer after layer, it's one of the most important conversations you can have with yourself.
The point is the moment you say I can't to yourself, you cut off any possibility of it happening. Yes, it's still possible that you stumble upon it, but most of the best things in this world you don't stumble upon. I think that you set goals and dreams, and I think that you make it happen.
Oh, sure. Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, NLU Weekly Live podcast for week number 119. A simple yet profound question we will be asking you. What are you saying about yourself to yourself? For a long time, Alan, you know this, I lived by myself in the woods of New Hampshire. It really wasn't that woody. It was actually a fairly busy town, but I did live in the woods. And I remember there were times where I did not speak to another human being for days on end. The only person I would speak to was the operator at Mike's Pie, a local pizza company that I frequented quite often. And when I think back, I realized that not only in that moment, but throughout our lives, we do not talk to anybody as much as we talk to ourselves. And it's the one conversation you can't hear. It's the one conversation that you're probably very, very honest with yourself about. And oftentimes, it's the one conversation that is hurting us the most, because if we don't believe in ourselves, we might be constantly putting ourselves down, or we might be calling out our flaws, or what we're saying might be impacting our identity. So we thought we would talk to you about that today for week number 119.
I heard a quote once, Kev, that said the quality of your life is the quality of your communication. Not just with others, but with yourself, primarily with yourself. I can influence Kevin when I communicate with him a certain way, but we are influencing ourselves every single day. And a lot of times what thinking is, we're all thinking, right? Think about being in the shower and you have all these thoughts because you're alone, most likely. And you're in the shower and you have all these thoughts come to you. We talk about that a lot on the podcast. And all thinking really is asking and answering questions. Earlier today, Kev, I drink these Zoas, and I always turn the tab to the right. And that's a habit that I came up with or had, because way back in high school, we used to party, and if you didn't turn the tab on your beer can and got caught without a turned tab, you'd have to chug it. And here I am at 33 years old, over a decade later, still turning my tabs as a habit. And I thought to myself earlier, why do I do that? Oh yeah, that's why I do that. So again, we're asking and answering questions all day, every day. And the question is, are you aware of what you're saying to yourself? Are you aware of the questions you're asking? Are you aware of the answers you're giving? For example, do I look good today?
I'd say
what's your answer? Yes or no?
Wonderful. You look wonderful today.
Oh, thank you, brother.
You're very welcome.
But that's constantly what's happening. So if you don't feel good about yourself, it's most likely the way you're communicating with yourself.
Taryn and I have been watching this show called Alone. And the premise of this show is there's 10 people who get dropped off. It depends on the season, but it's somewhere in the Canadian forest somewhere. They are out in the middle of nowhere, and they have to survive on their own for as long as humanly possible. They get to bring some different gear, but they have to find their own food. They have to build their own shelter. It's awesome. It's a very, very, very awesome show. And one of the things, and I think it might have been one of the motivations behind doing this episode, is oftentimes they talk to themselves because there's nobody else to talk to, and they're filming themselves. And you can see the difference between, so as an example, there's this guy who brought a fire starter. You can bring a fire starter. And he was in such a rush to get a fire started that when he got the fire started, he actually dropped the fire starter in the fire pit. And he burned the whole thing, and it's gone completely. And now he has to do it by hand. And he transitioned very quickly from, wow, I am an idiot, to, well, I'm just going to have to find another way. Where quite literally that would or may have taken other people out of that competition, because they might have kept that conversation going with themselves of, I cannot believe how stupid I am. I cannot believe I just got rid of the most important tool I had. There's a lot of that, and it's interesting, Alan. I'm always looking for lessons and stories in everything I do, because we do so much content. So I'm always trying to figure out, okay, how can I connect this to real life and impact our listeners? And that, I think, is now, upon saying it, one of the reasons I decided on this topic. So I was on a call the other day with a client, and we were going through her analytics on her podcast. She's a podcast client. And it got to the point where I said, I got to figure out how to set this part of it up with this growth rate and all this other stuff. I said, I got to talk to Alan. I don't know math at all. And I stopped and I said, hold on, let me correct myself. When it comes to math, Alan is just much more proficient at it than I am. And I reframed what I said about myself, because what you say to yourself often leaks into your self-worth. And as somebody who is behind the scenes doing spreadsheets with Alan and doing math with Alan, that will not serve me if I say, you know what, I'm terrible at math. I'm stupid. I'm not intelligent. I'm not smart enough to keep up with Alan. Now, is it true that compared to Alan, I might not be as good? Yes. But the way you say it dictates how it feels inside of you. There's a big difference between me saying, when it comes to math, Alan has studied it for much longer than I have and has been more focused on it, than I am stupid and I don't know math. Those are two very, very different things. And here's why. I actually know math quite well if you were to compare to the average statistical norm. But if I convince myself that I don't know math, I'm not good at math, that becomes part of my identity. And if somebody says, I mean, I don't know that this would ever happen, but say I was out somewhere and somebody said, hey, I have a math problem. Can somebody help me? My immediate reaction would be like, not me. I'm not putting this hand up. I'm not putting this hand up. Where if somebody said, hey, I'm looking for somebody to do a speaking engagement here right now, I might put my hands up because I feel, I've told myself, I've communicated with myself that I am a good speaker, depending on the day and what the live topic is of the week. So our first point, we're going to do things a little different. We brought 3 points. We're going to make it more conversational, as we mentioned last time. My first point, what you say to yourself leaks into your self-worth. If I just let that go in there and live there, I suck at math. That becomes part of my identity. That becomes part of every single thought process I have. That becomes part of what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, what risks I'm willing to take, what opportunities I'll say yes to, what opportunities I'll say no to. It might not seem like our self-talk is that important, but when you play it out and you dig layer after layer after layer, it's one of the most important conversations you can have with yourself.
Well, imagine something as simple as I'm not athletic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if there's an opportunity to do a 5K this weekend, you might say no to that because you believe you're not athletic. I think one thing to bring to the table here as well, what are you saying to yourself about yourself? It's important to understand this identity piece because it's very difficult to act consistently in a way different than what we believe about ourselves. So if Kevin let that leak in, I'm not good at math, you're going to naturally avoid math things. You're probably not going to be in spreadsheets as often. You're probably not going to take opportunities. You're probably not going to analyze your finances. Oh, I'm bad at numbers. Oh, I hate numbers. Oh, I'm not smart. So these things you say to yourself, they sound like this small thing, but yet when we imagine a friend of Kevin's came up and said, hey, you suck at math, right? It's like, that's really unkind. Why would you say that?
Have to get the
but yet we're
stick out, Hadouken to your throat.
Yeah, exactly. But yet we're doing that to ourselves all the time. Like, imagine if I just came up to Kevin and said, hey, you look like crap today. It's like, that would be really mean. And I don't think that, by the way, brother.
That's okay. I do need a haircut. I'm in desperate need of a haircut, hence the hat. So,
I needed one too. I just got one, luckily. But yet we talk to ourselves like that all the time. This is a really, really important topic. I'll tell this story briefly. So Kevin and I, this is probably 2 years ago now. Kev, we used to do something called reverse engineering regret. So I have these flashcards over here that I always carry with me, and one of them has the top 5 regrets of the dying. We interviewed this woman. Her name is Bronnie Ware. She wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. If you're an old listener, or a long-term listener rather, you know about Bronnie Ware. And we've had her on the show multiple times, 2 different times. And I'm obsessed with these regrets. They're so powerful. When you reverse engineer regret, you can make better choices today, and that's a whole nother podcast episode. But one of them is I wish I had lived a life true to myself and not what others expected of me. That's just one of the 5. And Kevin came up with this awesome idea. We used to do a lot of journaling. And he said, what if you just reverse engineered your regret every single day? You'd learn so much. And I was like, that's the best idea I've ever heard in my entire life. Oh my God, let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, so naturally I took all 5 regrets and I came up with questions about these regrets. And I rated myself from 0 to 10 on each of them. Long story short here, I spent 3 months looking at all the things I regret on a day-to-day basis. I looked at only where I was losing, not where I was succeeding. And I was on my way to Newport for Emilia's 26th birthday. So yeah, this was about a year and a half ago. And I remember I was talking to her and I was like, I just don't really feel very good about myself. I really don't feel good. It's funny now, but I remember actually saying some weird things like, yeah, no, I just don't think I'm that great. And it was a little weird for her to hear me say things like that because typically I have pretty high self-esteem and self-confidence for sure. And later on that evening, I had actually booked an Airbnb that was really, we talk a lot about this in relationship talks, but I'm not good at booking Airbnbs. This is the first time I've ever done this, and I essentially got duped. We practically had to clean the place. It was overpriced. It was really not a good experience. And so I was in the shame and guilt of that because I wanted to make her birthday special, and I really screwed it up. And later on, we were talking about my self-esteem. I said, I just don't feel very good lately. And she eventually uncovered, well, what have you been doing lately in terms of journaling? And I took her through my journal questions, and she was like, oh, that's really bad. It's basically just having you look at the previous day's mistakes every day. Now, I think it's important to look at your mistakes because then you can improve. But if all you ever do is beat yourself up and say negative things to yourself, you're going to be in a really tough spot. And so I just wanted to share that story because what you say to yourself really affects your self-esteem, and your self-esteem very much dictates your self-confidence, your self-worth, your self-belief, your self-trust, your self-respect. This is really a very important piece of who you become.
Alan, how do you, when you're working with somebody, I'm sure this is something that you look for, and see pretty quickly. What is the process for you when you see somebody talking either negatively or down to themselves? How do you unwire that?
Great question, man. I'm grateful you asked that. It's interesting. This is what you already shared. The example where you said, I suck at math. What I would do is help you reframe that to say, no, you're actually pretty good at math. You just aren't as far along as Alan. And what I mean by that is I would get you to see, the goal with my coaching, to answer your question, is to get individuals to see themselves and the world more accurately. Because it's really difficult. I'll just say this. It's impossible to make effective, positive, intelligent choices in the day-to-day if you don't see yourself or the world accurately. If you think you're a world-class speaker who is as good as Brendan Burchard right now and you've only given 10 speeches and you come to coach with me, I'm going to say, think again. Not true. Okay, not true. And by the way, you should not be as sought after as Brendan Burchard. It's not true. That's not real. But if you say you're the worst speaker and you could never get better, I'd also say not true. Of course you can. And so most of my coaching, Kev, is I notice what people say to themselves and I notice their beliefs and I try to shift them to see themselves and the world more accurately. Some people have a very inflated perspective of self, and some people have a very deflated perspective of self. And very few of us are actually accurate in our perception of self. And almost none of us are really fully accurate with our perception of the world. The world is very complex. And so I'll give you an example. We looked this up the other day. There's 62.8 millionaires in the world. 62.8 million millionaires in the world. And even right there, imagine if I had said 62.8 millionaires versus 62.8 million millionaires. See how one of them is accurate and one of them is inaccurate? Imagine if you believed that first one, Kev. How inaccurate are you going to see the world? You're going to think being a millionaire is nearly impossible, statistically speaking. So what I'm trying to do in my coaching is identify where people are inaccurate and where they overly berating themselves or negative, overly negative, or overly positive, quite frankly.
Alan and I, as you know, do many episodes every week, and it's definitely become, I won't say a struggle, but it's definitely a stretch to do 7 episodes and however many coaching calls and other podcasts I'm on. And oftentimes what'll happen is we record in air quotes all of our episodes on Monday. Usually that doesn't happen because it's very hard to do 7 episodes on Monday. So usually it'll get pushed to later in the week. Sometimes it'll be later in the week and something else will have come up and we have a conversation about that and we say, hey, we're gonna have to push these episodes. So I think it was last week. I don't know what night it was, but it was a long, long day. I think I started at 5. Alan, I'm sure you started pretty early. And I think we ended up meeting at like 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m., whatever it was. And we didn't get right into the episodes. We were talking about business, and we were talking about the future and all these things, and we were coming up with the content that we were going to do. And we started doing episodes. We were like, all right, cool. Let's do this. Let's get these out of the way. I know we're both tired. We'll be able to do it. And oftentimes, and maybe you'll know this if you watch us or listen, definitely if you watch us, sometimes we have laughing fits where we are so tired that we just start laughing at each other. And we used to be in the studio and we would literally have to pinch ourselves. So I would pinch my thigh, Alan would pinch his thigh because it was on the other side of the camera because we needed to stop laughing because we didn't have any more time to do the episodes. And we used to say, and Alan used to say this, he used to say, Kev, we got this. Like, just take a second, we got this. And I'd say, Alan, I can't. It's too funny. I can't stop laughing. I can't do it. And he'd say, Kev, just take a second and you got this. Like, we got to do this. We can do this. You can do this. And eventually it would always happen. Again, it might not be the first time. It might not be the second time, but eventually it would always happen. So the second point is the power of I can versus the power of I can't. Or I'll say the power of I can versus the disempowerment of I can't. If you think of this, any movie you've ever seen where somebody is hanging off the edge of a building, 2 things usually happen. 1, the person trying to pull them up says, you can do it. And the person hanging usually says, I can't do it. If both of those people said, you can't do this, the odds of that person surviving that are pretty, pretty low. And it's usually the hero who does the believing. And to our point today, sometimes you have to be the hero who believes in yourself. And I know that, Alan, I don't know that if it wasn't you and I doing this together, if I had those 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-hour days, it would be much, much harder for me to show up, especially when I didn't believe I could because I'm too tired, I'm too busy, whatever it may be. So if you can take can, get rid of can't, especially if that's your self-talk, you will be vastly more successful. And I would also throw it out there like this. Yeah, we're talking about what are you saying about yourself to yourself, but also what are you saying about yourself to others? That's another important thing because if you're saying this about yourself to other people, it's also going to be hurting you.
Hi, everyone. It was so awesome to meet you during our group coaching, G6. The reason I signed up in the first place is that I've been really doing self-improvement in all of my adult life, but I've been doing it on my own. I've been reading books. I watch, read books and, listen to podcasts and everything. But signing up for group coaching is having a group of people all working towards the same thing, bettering their lives financially, health-wise, relationships, just all of it, the full package. So I believe everyone could benefit from group coaching. Doesn't matter, how successful you've been in the past, how many other groups that you've joined up. This is something different. I absolutely know that Kevin and Alan are changing lives and will do so much more, and I can't wait to see where this goes. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
This just came to me when you were talking. Yesterday, I told you about this earlier, Kev. I've been playing a lot of basketball lately, and I've been playing this game I call Hot Shot. And essentially what it is if you've ever seen a basketball court, there's boxes near the hoop on the court, and then there's a couple tick marks, and then there's the foul line, and then there's the three-pointer at the top of the key. And what Hot Shot is, it's very simple. You essentially try to get the ball in from each of those spots as quickly as you possibly can. And so I set the timer for 30 minutes, and I've talked about this a little bit on the show lately. lately, every time I step on the court, I have a certain goal. I like to challenge myself. So it started off with I want to get 3 shots in a row in before I leave the court. Then it was 4, then it was 5, then it was 6, then it was 7. I just got to the point yesterday where it was I'm going to shoot for 10 in a row. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, and then a foul shot, and then a 3-point shot. And you have to get them all in a row, which is like ridiculously difficult. It sounds pretty easy, but it's really tough. And I got there yesterday, and my shots were not landing like they usually do. And I'm sitting there, and I'm having some serious doubts. I'm like, am I going to be... Because I don't let myself leave the court until I accomplish the goal. That's like a thing for me. And I'm like, am I seriously going to be able to do this? And all of a sudden, I start thinking in my head, like, okay, well, what if I decide to just not do the 3-pointer? What if I just go back to 9? I can go back to 9, no big deal. Start to rationalize these things. And I had this self-doubt, and I'm sitting there like, I'm not going to be able to do this today. It's hot as heck out. Like, I don't want to be out here all night. Emilia's coming home. I want to see her tonight. So, and then I have this moment in the middle of the self-doubt, right in the middle of it. And I'm talking about real self-doubt. This is not an easy task. Imagine shooting a basketball 10 times in a row and not missing a shot in those 10 times. I mean, the statistical probability of that is very, very low. And so I'm sitting there with all this doubt, like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. Can I do this, really? And I said, okay, you got this. You can do it. You can do it. I got it like 30 seconds before the timer went off. And I was so surprised when I landed that last 3. Like, I literally screamed out loud. There was a woman gardening across the street. She probably heard it. I was like, oh my God, I did it. Like, so pumped. The power of I can versus I can't. I don't know where I've gotten this, maybe since I was a kid or whatever. I just really do. I mean, if you saw the amount of focus I had yesterday alone on the court, you'd have probably thought I was a crazy person. Like, who is this dude who's so intensely trying to get this done? And that's my own drill, and that's my own training, and that's all good. And it's not like I'm a professional basketball player or anything. But I had to prove to myself I could do it. I just had to. And that I can do this, I can do this, I got this, I can do this. I want to encourage everyone listening or viewing to have more of that. Even if you fail, I'm not going to lie to you, you're going to fail. I mean, there's a chance that I was out there for an hour and a half yesterday and still not able to do it. Genuinely, that was my fear. I was like, am I going to be out here for 2 hours and still not get this done? Should I just lower this bar? Should I not do this? Like, should I just relegate basketball a little bit and not have to make this a big deal? But then I was like, no, I got this. I can do this. Now, I'm not going to go more than 10. My goal is to stay at 10 because even that is fairly unreasonable. But to the point, if I had said that I can't, no matter what, there's no way I'm going to do it. And so the moment you say I can't do something, it closes the door on all possibilities. I remember I had a friend who I used to see at my gym. This is a long time ago, Kev. This is before you and I partnered up. And I remember we had a conversation about the future, and he wanted to buy a home, and he was actually making good money at the time. And he said something along the lines, I was talking about building a business and how I had a dream to be a millionaire. And he's like, oh, I can't be a millionaire. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why would you say that? Why would you ever say that I can't be a millionaire? And this person, by the way, definitely could. Mathematically speaking, there's no question. They probably will end up being a millionaire, honestly. This person is a very hard worker. Like, they have what it takes, genuinely. And I remember I went home later that night, and I thought to myself, like, why would he ever say I can't? The chances of you being a millionaire when you say you can't be a millionaire drastically decrease. It's still possible. It's still possible you end up doing it. But in my head, I was like, it doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't he just say I might be? At least try I might. Who knows? Maybe I will. The point is the moment you say I can't to yourself, you cut off any possibility of it happening. Yes, it's still possible that you stumble upon it, but most of the best things in this world you don't stumble upon. I think that you set goals and dreams, and I think that you make it happen. And honestly, that's when you start to feel good about yourself anyways, when you can prove to yourself what you're capable of through your own merit, through your own belief, through your own work ethic, and through your own self-confidence and self-respect.
Alan, back when I was a newbie in the self-improvement, personal development game, I started with what a lot of people start with. I started with positive affirmations. That's what I started with. Every night before I went to bed, I would say, I am talented, I am handsome, I am worthy, I am intelligent, and this year I will make more money than I've ever made my entire life. And I really
did all of those come true?
Well, I don't know if I became handsome. I am talented, I am handsome, I am worthy, I am intelligent. I would say so, yeah. I would say so. And I definitely made the most money I'd ever made in my entire life. The other part of it, too, is oftentimes what you say to yourself, you focus on. What you say to yourself, you focus on. I think all the time about the self-talk of high-level athletes or high-level performers. There's this scene, or not a scene, but it's this video I saw on Instagram that is the 5 or 10 seconds of Leonardo DiCaprio getting ready to do one of the scenes in The Wolf of Wall Street. And I'm just thinking, what is he thinking about right now? In this moment where this, I don't know, $200,000 camera is about to start, and every minute that they screw up probably costs them so much money, as one of the best actors in the world, potentially ever, in this massive hit of a movie, what is his self-talk when he's getting ready to do it? And I'm sure it's empowering, and I'm sure it's, I can do this. It's probably, I won't say egotistical, but I'm sure it's like, I am the best ever of all time. It just speaks to the power of positivity.
Put it this way, I'm sure it's not, I'm going to screw this up, but that's so important. Yeah.
Well, every time I've thought that, whether it's a speech or a podcast or whatever it is, anytime I get too, even today, if I get too in my head about thinking about what I'm saying, so like, oh, that's not going to land. Oh, you're rambling. That's when things really get jeffed and go off the rails, because I'm talking about myself to myself.
I had a moment yesterday when I was doing that basketball drill where I was like, Alan, you are losing in advance. There's no way you're letting your mind get the best of you. You're going to lose. There's no way you're going to win with this kind of thinking. So I had to shift it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm defeated before I even try if I keep thinking this way. Because I was having a tough day. I was a little dehydrated and I forgot my water. So I'm like, in my head, it's just doubt. It's like, you need to climb out of this. It's called mental fitness. What we're talking about right now really is mental fitness. It's how do you take control of your mindset? How do you take control of your thoughts? In cognitive behavioral therapy, it really talks about how your thoughts dictate your emotions, and how your emotions dictate your biochemistry, and how your biochemistry dictates how you show up in a given moment. And if you're thinking defeated thoughts and doubting thoughts, you're going to have negative, doubting, defeating emotions, and then you're going to show up poorly, and then you're going to confirm the fact that you think you suck, quote unquote, right? And so it's super important to take charge of this process. It's not easy. It's actually really, really difficult. But I think if you can become more hyper-conscious of it, that was the name of our old podcast for the new listeners.
Damn right it was.
Become acutely aware of how you're speaking to yourself. And this is a question I would ask everyone. I always say that quote of, if you had a friend who broke as many promises to you as you've broken to yourself, how much would you value that friendship? Here's another quote. If you had a friend who spoke to you the way you speak to yourself, how quickly would you not want to be friends with them ever again? And when our head hits the pillow at night, we only have our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own beliefs. And, it's a choice. I think that's something we really need to understand, is that these thoughts are a choice. They don't feel like a choice because they seem so conditioned. I was on the phone this weekend with a client, and we had 2 columns. I said, I want to know what you don't like about yourself and what you do. And I want you to be honest with me. And I want you to be honest with yourself. And here's why. If we can identify what you really don't like about yourself, and I told her this, I said, in all honesty, you're very irrational about your thoughts about yourself. Because you think you're not beautiful, and you definitely are. It's irrational to not like these things about yourself. You have a beautiful smile. Why don't you like your smile? It doesn't make any sense. And maybe you're conditioned. Maybe you didn't like your smile before you had braces. I don't know what the past was. But you don't spend the rest of your life saying, I hate my smile. If you hate your smile, you're going to smile less. If you smile less, your biochemistry will shift towards negativity. There's a lot of studies around your face muscles actually releasing endorphins. And so there's just so much to this. And your thoughts about yourself to yourself are a choice. The things you say to yourself are a choice. but they aren't a choice if you keep letting it happen unintentionally, unconsciously. You have to become more intentional about it. And honestly, I can't pretend to be an expert in this either, because during this episode, I've had a few moments where it's like, am I as intentional with my thoughts as I used to be? You know, some of them have become autopilot, and some of them are really empowering autopilot beliefs, but some of them I guarantee you aren't.
It's interesting. I have those thoughts often of, am I doing what I used to do to get to where I am? Just in general, like, am I thinking the same way? I always think about stuff I used to say. I used to have all these sayings that I don't say anymore because they're replaced with new sayings. I don't even remember the old ones anymore.
Give me an example.
I can't because I don't remember it. If I could remember it, I'd give it to you. It's out there in the ethos, floating a boot.
Floating a boot.
Floating a boot. Alan has been recommending this book, but what's the Simon Sinek book you've been recommending to everybody?
The Infinite Game.
The Infinite Game. So right before COVID really popped off in the U.S., Taryn and I went to New York. So Taryn got me tickets to go see Simon Sinek in person. And I was like, this is going to be awesome. We went to New York. Driving around New York City, around Times Square, is the worst experience. It's brutal. Taryn was like, I don't know how you're doing this. You're like a magician. And I said, honestly, I'm losing my mind. I'm just trying to keep us alive. And we
Were you in the Subaru at the time?
I was in the Scoob. Yeah, we were in the Scoob. We parked in this underground... Was it the Scoob? Yeah, it was the Scoob. We parked in this underground garage where you pull onto a platform and then it just lowers you into the earth.
No way.
Yeah, it was honestly quite trippy. I didn't enjoy it very much. I was a little nervous. But so we went, we checked into the hotel, we took a little nap because we had a long day. We had breakfast, we made a day out of it, and we had gone to the M&M store in Times Square. We got a bunch of M&Ms.
Oh yeah,
it was amazing.
Peanut
all of the kinds, mint,
Always.
all the kinds. Mm-hmm. We woke up from our nap, we went to dinner, and then we went to see Simon Sinek. And at the end, there was a Q&A. So this was Simon Sinek doing a cross-country tour where he was speaking on the same thing, but he was doing it in a bunch of different places. So we went to New York. I think he did it in New Jersey, and he was all over the place. As you know, one of the things I try to do to get outside of my comfort zone is when I'm at an event, I try to ask a question. Oftentimes, I don't even have a question. So I try to make one up because I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone. So there was a line, so I went and sat down. We were on the upper decks. So I was kneeling down right in front of the railing, just waiting for my turn. And eventually I get my turn. And I was like, all right, let's see what happens. And I think I said something along the lines of, Simon, if you were giving advice to somebody 30 years younger than you, or something like that, 25 years younger than you, to get to where you've gotten, what advice would you give? And Simon Sinek kind of crapped on me a little bit. I don't remember his exact answer, but Taryn was ready to go down there and give him the Hadouken. And I told Taryn, I said, babe, it wasn't a good question. I said, it wasn't a good question. I didn't give him any context. That's not a good question to ask in front of 1,000 people or whatever it is. Like, that's just not a good question. I'm better than that. I should have done better. So the point I'm making, you have to understand where you are on the drive to 5 to figure out what you should be saying to yourself. So and Alan, you can explain the drive to 5.
I will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. If that was the first time I had ever asked anybody a question, and I wasn't a podcaster, I wasn't a speaker, I wasn't a coach, I probably would have treated myself a little bit different. Maybe I would have said, it's okay, Kev, you got out of your comfort zone and Simon's just not nice. Maybe Simon's a bad person. Maybe he was having a bad day. Or I would have said, well, you just don't have to do that again next time. Like, of course you didn't ask a great question. You were super nervous and there was a bunch of people there, and I would have let myself off the hook. And there's no problem with that. I went the opposite way and I said, I'm confident enough to ask the question. That means, in my opinion, I'm confident enough to give myself the truth of, that wasn't a great question. I've asked many questions to many successful people, and that wasn't the best one. So I tried to take ownership of that, but that was dependent on the fact that I was confident enough to do that. If that was somebody else's first question, I would have said, make sure you give yourself a pat on the back. I'm proud of you for doing that. I'm proud of you for getting outside of your comfort zone. The result does not matter. To me, the result mattered because I had the confidence to do it, and I had to check in with that. So I think that's an important thing to end here with, is the self-talk you have is very dependent on where your level of confidence is. If you're somebody who is a 10 out of 10 confidence, I think you should be harder on yourself than somebody who might have a 0 out of 10 confidence, where they should be focused on the positives and way less on the negatives/improvements. They should be grateful that they tried, not that it didn't go perfectly well.
All right, I'm going to try to explain this. The drive to 5, we've talked about it many times. It's a framework that really has lasted the ages. No,
it has all 5 years.
It's lasted ever since the beginning of the Hyperconscious podcast. It was from the beginning to now, and it's only proven more and more true, which is interesting. The drive to 5 is essentially, picture a scale from 0 to 10, and 5 is in the center, obviously, and 5 is the optimal stopping problem. 5 is where you want to get. 5 is self-confident, but also humble. 10 is super arrogant. And 0 is super, super fearful. So the 10s are the puffer fish, the people who want to believe they're better than they really are, and they're overly confident to pretend they have skills they really don't. 0s are the turtle shell. They hide and they don't think they're worthy of much or capable of much. So the best way to describe the drive to 5 is that the 10s don't think they need a mentor. They think they're totally awesome no matter what by default. They don't need a mentor. I don't need coaches or mentors. I'm fine. I'm good. The 0s don't believe they deserve a mentor, or they're too afraid to get one. And ideally, what we try to do at Next Level University is bring you closer to the truth. The truth is 5. So there are times when I have an inflated view of self, and sometimes I have a deflated view of self based on the truth. So if you've done 100 speeches and you think you're the best speaker on the planet, you're probably inaccurate. Most likely, that's an inflated. You're above 5. If you've given 100 speeches and you think you're a terrible speaker, even though everyone tells you that your speeches were super impactful, you're most likely on the low end of drive to 5, and you need to give yourself a little more credit. So to Kevin's original point, I remember I had a client once, and I'll never forget it. This was a really big lesson for me. She said, "I want you to be as hard on me as you are on yourself." And when she said this, I really felt strongly, intuitively, that would be a mistake. And in my head, it went, no, I should not do that. That's not true. One of the reasons I have such a hard time with this industry is that whether it's a book or a podcast, ourselves included, personal development is very personal. What one piece of advice for this client is potentially bad advice for someone else. It all depends on the context. It depends on the person. It depends on the goals. It depends on the core values. It depends on the circumstance. There are principles that are universal. The drive to 5, I believe, to be a principle that's universal. But depending on where you are on the drive to 5 dictates what advice we give. So Kevin and I are constantly learning and relearning our listeners of this show. And the reason why is because we need to know who we're speaking to. You know, if what's a good example of someone who has super, super high self-confidence? If Serena Williams is playing tennis and she does a terrible job, I guarantee you she's going to say, oh my God, I suck. And that's going to motivate her to go work harder and be better. But that doesn't mean a brand new tennis player should say, oh my God, I suck. It's like, no, for a beginner, you're actually pretty good. And so to Kevin's original point, it's very, very important for you to understand, do you feel like you need to be a little harder on yourself? Or do you feel like you really need to build some self-esteem by looking and focusing more on your wins and by what you say to yourself? If you wake up every single day and say, I'm awesome no matter what, and I'm the best, like, of course you need a humble pie. You need some humble pie. You need to start being a little harder on yourself. If you wake up every morning and you think, oh my God, I suck, I'm the worst, like, you need to start being a little more positive. And all of us have to find this sweet spot. Stephen Kotler talks about the challenge skills sweet spot. You need to find 5 for you. And Kevin and I always are trying really hard to stay at 5. We don't want to be overly confident, but we don't want to be overly self-doubt either. It's very difficult to find the right amount of self-confidence, the right amount of self-worth, the right amount of self-belief for the goal and for the outcome. You know, some people always compare to what they're capable of. Other people always compare to other people, and sometimes they're the big fish in the small pond. So you don't want to be the small fish in the whole ocean and constantly beat yourself up and say negative things. But you also don't want to be the huge fish in the tiny pond thinking that you're the best fish ever. And I think it's really important to understand this and to, from this frame of what are you saying about yourself to yourself. If you feel like you're above 5, start saying some harder stuff on yourself. Start like this client. I want you to be as hard on me as you are on yourself. No, you don't. No, you don't. And I shouldn't. Sometimes I should maybe, but every single client I have 27 clients now. I'm very, very grateful. The advice I give has to be customized. I can base it on principles, but it has to be customized. And the same goes for you coaching yourself.
Last question from me to you. If you had to bet the entirety of NLU on who could return a serve from Serena faster, you or I, who would you bet on? Real quick. Lightning round.
I got to go with me.
Yeah, that's you'd be wrong.
I got to go with me.
I'm just kidding.
I got long arms.
I would say I can't, is what I would say for that.
I would bet that we both fail miserably.
If it was return it, I would put my head down and I would just try to head it over the net. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. I'll take one for the team.
We would both lose horribly.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. NLU would be no longer. One of the large goals we set this year was to do 2 events? Or do we want to do 4 events this year?
We wanted to do 4.
We wanted to do 4 events. That's not happening.
We did 2. We did 2.
Yeah, so one of them now is actually on our website. So imagine if you were somebody who wanted to come to Next Level Live that was in Worcester, Massachusetts. Maybe you were in a different country. Maybe you were in a different state. Maybe you were busy that day. We took the entire speech, the whole event, everybody's speech, not just Alan or myself. So we have Dr. Taryn McCarthy's and Tori Aletto's, as well as the Q&A. We have it packaged. It has everybody's PowerPoint. It has worksheets. It has everything you need, and it is on our website now. So if you go to nextleveluniverse.com, I believe it's /courses, but the link is in the show notes and or Facebook. And yeah, we would love for you to have that. A lot of people couldn't make it. That was very hard for us because we have so many listeners all over the world, and it wasn't realistic for everybody to fly in, so we wanted to repurpose this and repackage it as a online course for you.
Not to mention, a lot of our listeners weren't able to fly in because of COVID.
Yeah.
That was really, really challenging as well. Okay, so if you have ever considered and wondered what this coaching thing is all about, I did, I think, 6 free 30-minute calls last week. I love them. I love to meet the listeners. So if you've ever wondered, what is this coaching thing about? Like, give it a shot completely free. There is no strings attached. I am literally not going to sell you anything. I'm going to jump on the phone. I'm going to ask your intention. I'm going to tell you mine, and then we're going to crank. And a lot of times they go past the half hour. I really want to meet you. If you've ever been curious about what coaching might be like, don't diss it till you try it. I hope that you book on my calendar, and Amy will be putting the link in the comments on Facebook and LinkedIn, and then it will also be in the comments of the show notes.